So hello and welcome back to a brand new episode of the DNF1 F1 Podcast, the show where we talk all of the latest news, gossip and events in the world of Formula 1, and we relay that back to you for your listening or viewing pleasure, depending of course on which platform you choose to follow us on. And guys, I hope you are doing well. I am absolutely buzzing right now after what we've seen from the F1 season so far. For those of you that do listen to this podcast regularly will probably know why, but the weather is a lot warmer, the sun is out, things seem a little bit brighter in the world, although for obvious reasons, depending on where you are, hopefully you are okay and safe wherever you are around the world. But I'm really excited about this podcast and I'm hoping that you guys will be too, and hope you enjoy it as we're enjoying the Easter bank holiday weekend. I've got a fantastic guest that I think for a lot of you that are watching us on YouTube will need little introduction, but I'm going to give him one anyway. It is the host of the Missed Apex podcast, and for those of you who aren't aware of who Missed Apex podcasts are, what are you guys doing? Honestly, it is the Pierre de Resistance of the independent Formula 1 podcasters, and I've got the host here with me to talk F1 and a little bit about himself in Missed Apex as well. It's Richard Spanners Ready. Spanners, first of all, thank you so much for coming on to the DNF1 F1 podcast. Absolute privilege to have you on. How are you doing?
That's very nice. I was doing very well, but you just said that you were happy about the weekend for obvious reasons. Does that mean I'm in the company of Tifosi?
Yes, and Michael Schumacher Tifosi as well, to add to that, which being a fan of your show, Spanners, I'm probably aware that we might clash on a few
oh my God, you made topics. It worse and worse and worse. Why not just say that Kimi Räikkönen's a bubbly personality that you love and you think he's brilliant? Go on, finish it off.
Have you read my show notes? Or
So no, it's really interesting because I'm glad that you're on a show where you're able to say who you're a fan of. So like currently, I'm a big Lewis Hamilton fan, and by kind of association a Mercedes fan. But really, from a team point of view, I grew up supporting Williams, and I'm also a Sergio Perez fan as well. And I do like people being able to, stand up here on a podcast platform and say who they're a fan of, because there was a phase, I think, in like F1 social media where people would get very upset with you if you declared who you were a fan of, which is absolutely ridiculous. F1, yes, it's engineering, yes, it's motor racing, but at the fundamental core of it, it's a sport with competitors, with gladiators that people pick a side on. And yes, sometimes that does revert to the default of the person who comes from your country, or sometimes it's because you relate to someone. And if you try and take away that passion of being a supporter of, say, Lewis Hamilton, or you incorrectly of Ferrari, the Death Star of Formula 1, if you take that away, you take away so much of the sport.
I love the way that you put that there, and I can totally understand why. And I think it's important. You kind of hit the nail on the head there, Spanners, pretty much, that we're all fans of the sport. And the reason why you or myself, one podcast host to another, make these shows is because of that love affair that we have with Formula 1. We will love to talk about it. In some cases, some of us might like the sound of our own voice more than others, but, maybe that's just me.
Gasp. Yes.
Yeah. But on top of all of that, we always have affiliations in certain camps, and I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I mean, I can totally understand where you're coming from on social media, especially what happened at the end of last season, where if you either have LH44 in your Twitter bio or MV1 or MV33, if you like, whichever one you want to go with, it's practically a minefield. So you want to try and avoid that as best as you can. So
MV asterisks, am I right?
Oh, yeah. I remember watching that race and it was the first race I watched with my girlfriend at the time. And when it was all unfolding, I couldn't believe what I was seeing. I said to her, this is not going to go away anytime soon. And she thought, is this a normal thing in Formula 1? I said, well, for the entertainment value, I wish, but it's certainly for the aftermath, probably not. But of course, we're not going to talk too much about Abu Dhabi if we can avoid.
No, not at all, if possible.
If I can, the only reason why I think that is the only good thing I can think. The only good thing I can think of following from Abu Dhabi last season is now people are going to talk about that rather than talk about the famous Adelaide incident in '94, Schumacher versus Hill. I believe that was a racing incident, wasn't it? Or no, it wasn't a racing incident at all. That was unbelievable. I mean, okay, I think I'm a decade older than you, so when that happened, I would have been around 14. You would have been 4. So I was like old enough to really feel completely robbed by Michael Schumacher. Basically, he stuffed it. I think if they drew, Schumacher was going to take the title. If Damon Hill finished ahead in the points, then he was going to take the title. Schumacher stuffed it. Hill
comes up the inside just to take us over a slower car, like a recovering car, and Schumacher just fully just turns into him and cracks Damon Hill's wishbone. And it was just, I couldn't believe that as a 14-year-old. And I was just going, well, they've obviously got to disqualify him, like obviously. And then Damon Hill pulls into the pits, and you think, come on, get out. And then they don't let him go. And I remember the commentary team going, no, it's irresponsible to send a car out with a broken wishbone. You can tell this still hurts. This is still too soon.
Oh, I can hear it in the sound of your voice, Richard, yeah.
And I was like, it doesn't matter. You're a gladiator. Get out there, Damon. Broken wishbone or no. But I think they retired the car from memory. And then Schumacher won. And they let him keep the title. I'm just so crestfallen. Like, how could they possibly let that stand when it was obvious cheating? And then you had people like arguing, no. Well, Hill should have been more patient. The car's recovering. You don't stop. You don't park to let someone get back on track. And it was an obvious turn-in to me. And then I guess I'm glad in a way that the same thing happened against Jacques Villeneuve. Because it kind of showed, it was the same kind of desperate last race move. And it kind of just showed, you put that in context of 94 now, and it's much more obvious, kind of case closed. Yeah, and then to come on this podcast, find out you're a Schumacher fan and a Ferrari fan. It's all gone off to a terrible start.
Well, I mean, I didn't plan for it to go so terribly, but obviously, you never plan for these things. No, to be fair, Spanners, if it was judged today, I think, something like that, they probably would have reviewed it and probably said, yeah, that's out of order. They've got to, take retrospective action. And to be fair, I kind of agree. He did do what he did. It weren't as bad as the ref, but it was still very, very bad as Schumacher to do what he did. So, I suppose any solace, I can hold my hands up as a Schumacher fan and say, yeah, he was a bit over the line on that one. And
yeah,
but I can understand why not many. Depending on what camp you're in, even not that incident, other incidents in the future, it's hard to find some F1 fans that will be, affiliated with one camp that will try to be open-minded to admit, yeah, my driver messed up, but...
Okay, tell you what then, I'll do something that I haven't said on my podcast or any other podcast platform, right?
Ooh, exclusive.
With regards to Abu Dhabi. So Lewis Hamilton fan, since he came in, big Lewis Hamilton fan, obviously wanted him to win the championship. During the off-season, as I'm getting over it, and I'm still boiling and seething, because it was obviously a garbage thing to happen and it shouldn't have happened. But I did kind of think to myself, it is probably good that he didn't just win yet another championship. It's probably good he didn't win 6 in 7 from a sporting point of view. Obviously, if it had been in a better, more clear-cut way, that would have been better. But for the overall story of F1, I was like, yeah, it has been a bit much. Because this is the other side of the fence. When Schumacher was collecting all those titles and then Vettel was collecting all those titles, I definitely thought something needed to change and they were ruining the sport and it was horrific. And I never felt like that for Lewis Hamilton dominating and picking up all the titles. But then when it finally happened and it boiled down and it settled down, I kind of thought, yeah, that'll do, pig. There's been quite a lot of Lewis Hamilton titles. We were due a not Lewis Hamilton title.
Yeah, no, I love the Babe reference as well. Obviously, I think that's rather fitting in a weird way. But you're absolutely right. I think with eras of F1 changing, and obviously we've had dominant periods, one era after the other. The Schumacher one, obviously, I enjoyed that a lot more than others did. But I could totally understand the need for a Fernando Alonso to come along. The Matador, that breath of fresh air, and obviously with Vettel, that collapse in 2014, which saw the rise of Hamilton and Mercedes in particular. F1 needs that, and
yeah.
In the nicest way possible, I totally agree. F1 needed the rise of Verstappen to a degree, perhaps not in that manner.
Not in that way.
But we've got it now, and we're just going to have to go on with it as we can.
And the rise of your Tifosi and the rise of your Mr. Leclerc.
Yeah, well, we've been building that hype train for Ferrari for about 15 years now. We almost had a few moments in 17, 18. We had a bit of a hype train over the winter in 2019, and then it never really delivered into anything, as so often with Ferrari. So you can imagine our sort of skepticism in the winter break coming into this season, and our pleasant surprise, actually, it's bearing some fruit, or at least for the time being. But since we've got you on, Spanners, I wanted to introduce a bit of an icebreaker question, although we've kind of had a bit of an icebreaker topic already.
We've already yelled at each other.
Exactly,
we're best friends now.
Exactly. Pretty much going to be best friends from here on in. But I wanted to try and trial this with you and use this for future one, if I may. So here it is. If I could give you any Formula One car from history and you got to drive it for one day around any circuit you like, what car would you choose and where would you go?
Oh, that's interesting. I've only got one day, you see. Does the fact that the modern cars, you've got to learn all the buttons, can I insert that that knowledge?
Assume that you're an expert at this car. Nobody can drive it better than you know every single facet of the car.
Okay, so the temptation would be, well, the modern ones, like maybe the 2017, which was that the fastest ever for lap times and stuff, and that's where they bolted on all the downforce as they panicked because of the 2014 cars were quite slow, so they packed on the downforce, didn't they? And it made everything a bit rubbish. But I would want to kind of go a little bit simple. I'm also a 41-year-old dad, so I don't want to like throw my life away yet until the kids have grown up a bit. The modern cars are probably the safest, but there's not maybe that raw racing that I, as an amateur, would want to feel. I wouldn't want to go back as far as those 50s cars. I recently saw some footage of the first Grand Prix, and when they're in like these basically torpedo tube bathtubs with the little wheels, they don't really appeal to me very much. I very much like the survival cell element as it kind of crept into the 90s. But I guess the nostalgia would probably take over and go, what was the era where I felt Formula One was like my Formula One growing up? So I would probably go for, was it the 98, 97 Williams with Jacques Villeneuve? When was he in there?
97, yeah.
And there was one race I remember where he was following, was it Damon Hill's last season in the Williams?
Oh, that would have been 96, wouldn't it? When he won the World Championship,
maybe.
Yeah.
And all like brake fluid or something was pouring off of the back of Damon Hill's car, and it just completely covered the car behind. And that oil-soaked Williams, someone will correct me and say it was Coulthard or something a lot later. I don't think it was. But yeah, that oil-soaked Williams, to me, that is where it looks like a Formula One car. It's got a survival cell. It's maybe not as complicated as modern F1 cars. And I would take that and I would drive around Silverstone. I fully believe, and it's not British bias at all. No, you shut up. Silverstone is the greatest Grand Prix track in history. So Silverstone or Interlagos. I like Silverstone. Like I've driven on it in other cars, like very small amateur type cars. But it's just a beautiful track with the right mix of you've got long straight, so you can feel the potential of the car. You can see the corner coming. I'm not a big fan of undulation. You can see the corner coming. You can aim for that curb. You can get on the power nice and early. There's runoff to save you, and that's what I would go for. Interlagos, I think, would be much more of a roller coaster ride. But there's a part of me, there's a core part of me that knows deep down that if it wasn't for the curse of my socio-economic background, I would definitely have been a Formula One champion. And I would feel that most in that Williams at Silverstone. There we go. How's that?
I think that's absolutely perfect. Honestly, I love the way that you've described Silverstone. And for me, I'm kind of the same in that regard. I love Suzuka as a driver's circuit. I think it's quite a fun one to drive. But for whatever reason, maybe it is that British bias or whatever it is. I don't know. But you just feel at home in Silverstone. It just seems like the right place to drive, like the home of Formula One. It just feels perfect. I mean, and that era as well. That does resonate with me, although I probably go with a 97 Ferrari. I just like the look of it, and then I'll probably be boring and say, no, you know what, F2004 for obvious reasons. But yeah, definitely somewhere like that. I'd probably, like yourself, Spanners, I'd probably be a little bit timid about driving some of the older cars because it feels like...
like death traps.
Yeah, well, pretty much, yeah. For that reason, I don't think I'd be brave enough. As soon as it twitches a little bit, I'd literally I'll park it up and get out. I was like, nope. I'm
even looking back. I'm just searching I'm trying to look for that old oil-stained one, but I can't find it because I'm sure I've got the drivers wrong. But even if I look at like the Mansell Williams, that still looks very exposed and very boxy, and it's like just one guy called Derek, knocked that up at the beginning of the season. When you go to kind of the Damon Hill era, like late 90s Williams, that's when it starts to really kind of look like a modern F1 car with some engineering nous behind it. And if you look back at those races and watch, say, some late 90s Grand Prix, for example, I watched the Malaysian Grand Prix, I think it might have been 97, 98, but you suddenly see the cars really struggling and fighting to get on the power, which is something we don't really see now. So when we saw Sebastian Vettel lose it at the Australian Grand Prix under power, at low speed, which is something that he seems to uniquely do in F1. He did it at Monza at slow speed in the Aston Martin. He did it several times. He just kept dropping it in the Ferrari, but it's quite rare to see. We tend to see drivers seemingly just get on the power and get planted. You go back to the 90s and they're really having to be progressive, and every time they blip a bit of power, you see that in what they're having to do with the steering wheel, and there's something that's been lost in not needing to do that. But as soon as you look back at it, you go, "Ooh, that looks like Formula One."
They do. I think the youngsters really missed out on those eras. I mean, some people can say the racing wasn't as exciting as it is now in terms of on-track action and overtaking. I mean, there is something to that. And what was it? I think a few years ago, the French Grand Prix at Paul Ricard, everyone was going crazy about how boring that race was. And then there's me sitting like, well, it's an F1 race. Like, you know, what do you want?
Normal.
What do you want?
Normal F1 race. Yeah, we mustn't look with rose-tinted glasses, because obviously we'll hark back to the cars that we grew up with, and there was something special about it, but it was a different sport. And like you say, a couple of overtakes a race wasn't entirely uncommon. And you go, would we swap the modern F1 now and go back to that? I don't think it would work as an entertainment platform. I think we've been spoiled. I think 2017, 2018, 2019, actually really good racing, you know, and even like if you look at the 2013 season, even though it was dull because of the domination, there was good racing up and down the pack. And personally, as much as I love that 90s era, there's no way I would swap back now.
No, absolutely. I think 2012 always resonated well with me as well. Like, I think we had 6 or 7 different winners in the first 6-7 races, including Maldonado.
Seven different winners in 7 races.
Yeah.
See if we can name them. Maldonado,
Rosberg, Vettel, Alonso,
yeah, Hamilton,
Button. Was he one of them?
And Webber wasn't one of them.
No, he wasn't. No, wasn't it? It wasn't Kimi.
It could have been Raikkonen.
Could have been. No. I'm just thinking. Was it 2012 that he came back in the Lotus and won in Australia, or was it 2013?
There we go. So people will be screaming now at the screen. Why didn't you research this in advance? But I think we're nearly there. Well, that's our job as hosts on podcasts. It's not us to be the experts. It's our panel, our guests that are meant to offer the expert insight, isn't it? It's to scramble around while people Google things. I did it. It was Mark Webber. There you go. That was the missing one.
No.
Mark Webber won in Monaco.
That's right. That is right. Yeah, I remember that. And obviously no appropriate right time, but there we go, nonetheless. So obviously we were talking about the early 90s. Is that the era that kind of spoke to you the most when you were growing up? Is that your earliest memories of F1?
No, not my earliest memories of F1. I remember being in primary school and you get plonked down in front of the TV to watch it. So you're kind of an F1 fan by default. For whatever reason, I was a Riccardo Patrese. I claimed my allegiance there, probably nearly shared Christian name was all that took. But obviously getting very excited about Nigel Mansell as well. So Nigel Mansell in the Red 5. But yeah, that's as a kid. Into the 90s is definitely when the real passion for it sparked. And that's my era of F1, if you like, until Schumacher ruined it. And here you are rejoicing in that.
Well, I mean, my earliest memories of F1, I obviously had a love affair with Ferrari from the get-go, but that was back in the days when we had Gerhard Berger and John Lacey driving in Ferrari.
That was a good Ferrari outfit, and that team tended to kind of be in and around the points when it was only 6 positions that were paying points, wasn't it? And you always felt like that team had a lot of potential, but if I remember rightly, the engines would blow up quite a lot, things would fall off the car.
Pretty much like Red Bull now, to be honest, is literally the equivalent.
You know what? That's a good point, because last season they were so reliable. People have very quickly forgotten, and I had as well, that actually Red Bull do occasionally get plagued with these kind of reliability issues. And this season, them coming out of the box and having 6 or 7 different types of failure that have caused the car to stop amongst the two teams isn't mega surprising. Maybe the scale of it and how quickly it's all seems to be happening. But yeah, that was a thing that had dogged Red Bull. Yeah, no, absolutely.
Unfortunately for Ferrari, the engine wasn't fast either. I mean, it was there on occasion in that era before Schumacher came along, and obviously, 96 was other than Spain, but it was a bit of a fact-finding mission until it all changed. But yeah, I always remember the Canadian Grand Prix in 95, and that was a race where Schumacher should have won it, Hill then should have won it, then neither of them did, and then out of nowhere, Jean Alesi goes and wins that one race for Ferrari. Then, of course, a week later finds out that Schumacher's taking his seat, and then he obviously weren't too pleased about that. But yeah, happier times. In terms of, obviously, you growing up watching F1 Spanners, like yourself, obviously, I was used to that growing up in school. I was probably the only F1 fan at the time in my school. I think that was one thing F1 fans can resonate with, is the fact that if you weren't a football fan, automatically any other sport didn't matter.
Yeah, you try to talk to people about it and they'd be like, okay. But actually, the worst scenario isn't the not finding the other F1 fans. It's when people know that you are an F1 fan and they're not, but they're trying to make small talk and they know you're into F1. So you become the guy that's into F1. But now now everyone's into it. Like everyone's come and joined our club. But, you know, my brother-in-law came around banging on about Formula One, and he's never taken an interest in it. So yeah, we did used to be somewhat of a rare breed. So when we started podcasting, more than anything, it was so I've got other people to talk about F1 with. And, you know, I found my F1 friends, not having any F1 friends in real life. And now we have this whole community of people, you know, around us and doing our live events and stuff that are into F1.
And that's why we do it. Honestly, I think that has been the most gratifying part of this whole experience for myself. And I imagine for you the same thing. It's when you look at those stats, however impressive they are, just thinking, how are so many people tuning into my content to hear
our
me
stats.
And others?
Oh, our stats,
Well, your stats, my stats, anyone's stats, really. Like you tune in and see however many people download your show or my show or anyone else's, and you just think, it's amazing to see so many people want to take time out of their lives to hear and discuss Formula One with you.
I keep expecting, to check the figures one Tuesday, and for it to have collapsed and to people have to stop to realize that it's rubbish and to stop listening. But but it never feels like that in podcast world. I guess if you're a rock star and you're on a stadium tour and there's 30,000 people in front of you, you feel pretty mint. But I produce this stuff in a shed. You produce stuff in your bedroom, and then you just see a figure. And so for us, for race reviews this season, we're getting 30,000 audio downloads, which is just a crazy number. And if you want to imagine those people in front of you in a football stadium, don't do it. I think that's Ipswich Town, Portman Road amounts of people, which is absolutely crazy. But at the core, we've just got a very good community. Obviously we've got our Patreon community of people who support us, Facebook groups, people who follow you on Twitter, and all of that just makes it feel like you are in this huge community of supportive people who all love the same thing as you, and it just brings the whole thing alive, not just on race day, but every day of the week I've got someone to talk F1 to. Yeah,
and that's brilliant. And of course you've just recently surpassed 10,000 followers on Twitter, haven't you? Just today.
Oh god, now to see the exact number I have to hover over the 10,000 because the number's so big. I wouldn't expect you to understand, Adam. But no, that's lovely. For me, that's a little marker of my journey from mediocre engineer to middling media radio podcast person. 10,000 Twitter followers in a niche thing on Twitter, which is quite small in itself. Yeah, it definitely feels like a nice little marker of, all right, well, we're here now. A little way to go, but we're here now.
Well, that's it. You're a verified Twitter celebrity now. So how are you going to celebrate and enjoy your newfound fame?
Continue drinking. Is that valid?
Yeah, I think that's about right, to be fair. I can't think of any better answer for that, really. Obviously, let's talk about Missed Apex, because that's what a lot of our followers that listen to your show and those of you that have obviously just come on to see you for the first time obviously want to know about. How did that all begin for you? Because it wasn't the first podcast that you were involved in, was it?
No, so I started off podcasting. Basically, podcasting suddenly appeared, like in the back end of the late noughties. And I'd always tried to get onto radio, sent in my tapes. That's how old I am. Sent in my tapes and then sent in my CD and then said, please can you see you listen to my thing? And they pretend to listen, and they pretend that those positions aren't already taken by someone's nephew or niece, and they go, oh, we will give it a listen, yeah, I promise. And it never gets any further. Podcasting is democratized, isn't it? Like there's a democratization of media. You put out your content, and if some people like it, you can keep doing it. And in the early phase, no one listened to my parenting podcast called The Horror of Parenting. No one really listened. Actually, we did get a bit of a following for our Dad Hub podcast, where we just complained about being married and having children. But it's up to you to decide what level of success in podcasting makes you continue going on. And so I continued it as a hobby, and it was taking up all my hobby time. So I had to give up golf because, family time, work time, hobby time, all podcasting. And then, started going on F1 with a publication. That didn't work out. And then I ended up doing Missed Apex on our own with Matt, which at the time was a weird thing to have an American, because there were no Americans in F1. Hard to imagine now that we're flooded with Americans. Hello, Americans. And most of our listener base now, the largest territory by far is US listeners. So we just started plugging away and just kept setting little targets. 1,000 downloads would be like incredible. We celebrated very hard in 2017, the first show with 1,000 downloads. And with podcast world, You rely on word of mouth and just you're almost knocking on doors saying, hey, I've got a podcast, would you like to listen to it? So it's very much up to you how much you keep going, how much time you dedicate to it, and what constitutes success or value or worthwhileness. No one's going to come down and tell you to stop doing DNF1. It's completely up to you. And we just plugged away for something years. 8-9 years, I think we've been doing F1 podcasts, and now we've come up to the other end and we've ridden this wave where when we started podcasting, there was the BBC one and there was one called F1 Blog, which I don't know if it's still about, but there really wasn't many. And so we were able to position ourselves to be near the front of the independent, of the host-owned shows. And then with this Netflix, Liberty Media wave, we just were in the right place at the right time to just get picked up and pushed along with it. And it's been lovely. The last few years have just been wonderful.
Yeah, and it sounds great. I mean, speaking from my own experience, I can honestly say I'm so glad I started doing this a few years ago with a few mates, and it was just something you're always a little bit timid at first because you're thinking, oh, how would you sound? You know, you hate the sound of your voice when you're listening back. It's, oh God, is that how I sound? Or you mention opinions on your own show, you listen to it back just to see how it is, and you think, oh my God, did I actually say that? And then it just grows into something that becomes more than just a hobby. You're just a part of the routine, and you get so much great feedback, or at least most of the time anyway, depending on what driver you talk positively about week on week.
All of them the same. Hey, this is a quick curiosity. It's not really anything to do with F1, but talking about not liking the sound of your own voice. So when people hear themselves on a WhatsApp voice note or something, they go, oh, I hate the sound of my own voice. And of course, people like us would go through that as well. But I've curated my voice over the last 10 years of constantly listening to myself and listening back. So sometimes you look at a photo and you go, oh, I look like an idiot. Why am I gurning like that? But if you're someone who has their photo taken all the time for work, you start to go, oh no, jut your chin out. That, get rid of that double chin. You are over 30. Make sure you stretch it out. So same with the voice. There's lots of, like, I had an affectation where I ended a lot of sentences like that, or my S's kind of, went like that, and you go, oh, I don't like the sound of that, so you curate it. So now I love the sound of my own voice, and it's brilliant, and we can crack on.
I think the one that gets me is that sometimes I say a bit too much, and I only hear that when I listen back to it, and I'm conscious of it. But when you're not conscious of it, you realize, oh my God, did I used to say that all the time? It's quite a worrying tendency to have.
The young'uns, they lean on like all the time. I recently had to get rid of a pre-record because of someone using instead of like. Anyway, let's talk F1.
Yeah, let's talk F1. But I mean, before we just briefly get into F1, because we'll talk about missed Apex. Thank you. Obviously, you mentioned Matt Trumpet, and I'm not going to try and pronounce it the way you do. It's quite unique on your show.
Matt Trumpets. He hates that. And so do a lot of people. I've had so many complaints and people saying, stop doing that. You sound stupid, but
why?
I don't know.
It sounds great. I mean, what a great way to introduce your guest on the show. And I'm guessing there's an affiliation with Matt and trumpets, hence
he's a professional trumpet player.
Is it really?
He did proper conservatoire education, like a proper high grade trumpet dude. Yeah, he's not just some guy who learned to play the trumpet.
Oh, fair enough. I mean, how did you meet Matt, if you don't mind me asking?
Oh yeah, he was just he was just a blogger. He was just a blogger. But the thing is, I collect contributors based on their communication skills. So it's not necessarily a radio presenter or a podcaster that I would be after. I look for people who can communicate. So I saw Matt doing great race write-ups and went, well, you're probably a good communicator. We'll give you a shot. And then I realized as a pair, we're very different. He's much more slow and considered, and I'm more like an excitable puppy. And then we've got people like Brad Philpott, no experience as a presenter, but he was an instructor at Palmer Motorsport, and I've seen him give interviews, and you go, right, this guy can communicate his ideas well. He's generous in his communication. One lad was is a salesman, and his patter just came across. Commentators, journalists, stuff like that. People who can communicate and are going to be generous with their thoughts and words. That's what I look for. And Matt was just one of those people. And also, I like to have a big crew of people and let them know that they're all dispensable and I could get rid of any of them at a moment's notice.
Oh, it's a bit like being Toto Wolff, isn't it? Or maybe Christian Horner's probably more accurate, I suppose.
I want all the people who contribute to Missed Apex to feel like a Red Bull Junior driver. That's what I'm going for.
And for those of you that aren't quite sure what the reference is, if you're new to Formula One, I think Red Bull, since their inception, have had, I think, 15 or 16 different drivers come through their academy from start to finish. And
they've been ruthless. And to be honest, I don't really mind it. They've come under a lot of fire for like just getting rid of Alguersuari and Buemi and just getting drivers in like Hartley and then just getting rid of them. But I think, if they don't see a spark of what they think is going to be something special to move up to the Red Bull team, or they don't like their attitude or their approach, I think it's perfectly reasonable at the very top level of motorsport. Let's remember, this is the very top level. It's supposed to be hard. To get through to one of the 20 spots on the grid in the top echelon of motorsport in the world, you should be absolutely on it. And if you don't make it, that should be you out on your ear. And I think we are going to move more and more to a professional driver sport. I genuinely think we're going to see the end of the buy-in drivers. And specifically by buy-in drivers, I mean the paid drivers that specifically come in and pay for their seat. So I'm talking Mazepin, Latifi, Stroll. I think we've got to see an end to those drivers. And whenever I say that, people go, "Oh, 'twas ever thus. Oh, paid drivers are part of fabric of F1." Don't know, sorry, Northerners, but they always go, "Oh no, Nicky Lauda were a paid driver," and you go, "Okay, first things first. This isn't the same sport that was going on in the 70s. There wasn't the driver participation. So yes, of course, it was going to be a bit of a gentlefolks pursuit, and people who could go to the bank and raise money could then go and have an endeavor. If you look at Rush and how they raised their funds there, a rich friend bringing their race car team and making him the driver. But it's not that anymore. Now it's a very highly participant heavy sport, all the way down to karting. The standard of general driver is much, much higher than it was in the 70s and 80s. As much as people love to say, "Oh, Fangio would be just as good in modern F1," he obviously wouldn't. That's like if lawn green bowls suddenly became the most popular sport in the world. Derek from Basildon isn't going to be in the same highest echelons of the sport as he would be when it becomes a global sport. There's just a higher participation count. So we're going to move away from the Strolls and the Mazepins, hopefully, and just become, take this more seriously as a driver endeavor. So I think Red Bull are probably just a little bit ahead by saying, no, the drivers we're getting in are going to be the best from the young crop. We're going to set a high standard, and if they're not good enough, they're gone.
Yeah, and to be fair, I absolutely agree with that. I know that a lot of people sort of come back with it when they hear that and think, "Oh, but Hamilton was a paid driver or Schumacher was a paid driver." I'm like, well, it's not the same though. It's not though, is it? Because it's just one of those that, they've all had some level of backing, like for support. They've obviously not been able to pay their own way. I mean, hardly any driver has to some degree, but you always get those drivers that have a little bit of support, because every driver needs that to get into the top echelons form, no matter how good you are. I mean, the amount of drivers that have been lost over the years owing to a lack of funding and sponsorship is ridiculous, and who knows how good F1 would have been without that. Maybe we'll get that one day, but there's that level of paying into Formula One, and then there's the Strolls, the Mazepins, so many others that I can't really think of off the top of my head right now, but people that, and even in the older generations or the older eras of F1, there were some really ridiculous ones of people that shouldn't be anywhere near a Formula One seat. And yet they wouldn't. And I can understand why you would take someone like Fangio as an example. And if you plopped him into Formula One today, he would be absolutely useless. I get that. But obviously, that's kind of why some people say, well, you can't compare one era to another for different reasons.
Exactly.
That's kind of the caveat.
Don't compare the eras to each other. That's the easiest way to do it. But I think for me, it's just the level of participation and the standards that you'd expect. So people do throw a few things at me when I am anti-pay driver, and I am, is that that everyone's a pay driver, which here's the difference for me. Are you paid for who you are or what you can do? So if you bring in funding because of who you are, you're a paid driver. You're Lance Stroll. That money wasn't going to someone else. Lawrence Stroll wasn't sat at a go-kart track going, I want to back a driver. Who am I going to give hundreds of thousands and millions of pounds to? It could be any one of these kids. No, he wasn't doing that. it was always for Lance Stroll. That's why he's a buy-in driver. Latifi's money was always for Latifi. Mazepin's money was always for Mazepin. Someone spotted Hamilton and said, let's back that kid because he's going somewhere. Same for Alonso, same for Perez. So let's cut this everyone's a paid driver caveat. I need a better term. And the best one that's been suggested to me is buy-in driver. So let's get rid of the buy-in drivers.
I like that. I might use that one on the show for future episodes.
Yeah, buy-in driver.
Well, as long as I say buy-in driver, trademark pending for missed Apex. Is that right?
There you go, yeah. And then the other one is, well, they've got super licenses. Well, they've got super licenses, so they must be great. So clearly the super license is designed to filter out, someone who just can't keep it on track. And yes, you have to get to F2 and pick up the requisite amount of points. But it's clearly not enough if Latifi can be in one of the top 20 spots in motorsport in the world. So that obviously needs some revision. But even if you look at Lando Norris, he was funded all the way up to F2 before getting picked up by a Formula One team. Had he not got picked up by a Formula One team, I'm assuming he could have been a paid driver himself. I believe there's significant wealth there. But I think if we really want quality drivers, we're going to have to start looking at the tiers below F1 and not just make it, okay, you're 15, you go in F4, then F3, and then you're in F2 at 18, and then you've got your super license points. So if you've got money, you go in. If you've attracted the attention of a team, you get to go and be their FP1 driver. We've got to get to a point where we've got a bit of an umbrella underneath it. So maybe you have a couple of leagues of Formula 2, Formula 3, where you can't be funded into that level, or you already need super license points to get even to that stage. Do you know what I mean? So that it's more competitive at F2 and F3, and we need to kind of weed out. And I keep saying Latifi, and I don't want to offend Latifi or his fans or his family if they listen to DNF1, but Latifi shouldn't be in the F1 that I think F1 should be and will be. So where do you start drawing the line? You've got to say, well, okay, you can pay up to a certain level. Motorsport is expensive, but there's got to be something to stop it and to make it more merit-based in those lower tiers as well.
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree. And unfortunately, money is the object almost. If you don't have that, it doesn't matter if you have all the other traits that you need to be in F1. And until we get to a point where when you look down the junior categories and have a system in place, as you mentioned, where they are looking for more merit from these drivers, and obviously have more seats available to some of them, because I think that's another issue that F1, I don't think I'm doing enough to try and...
Yeah. So this is what I'm saying. If F2 and F3 have more seats available for people who have got through on merit, that would probably be more handy. I don't know the exact mechanics of it, but I am heartened by two things. The new FIA president saying he wanted to look at grassroots karting. So let's make karting more accessible, make karting competitions at that level, at a kind of a rental kart level, if you like, where there's a fleet of karts and you jump in, like W Series is demonstrating very well as well. Maybe even one day single-seater series where the series can promote itself, has funding from the very top and can be filled with non-paid drivers. Have that become more into our consciousnesses and more competitive. So if he's right, if he's genuine about that, that's really heartening. The other thing is Mazepin obviously got dropped by Haas, and they didn't bring in another paid driver. There's probably paid drivers out there, but they brought back Kevin Magnussen. So I'm assuming Kevin Magnussen collects a wage. So that's very encouraging as well, because you look at a Mazepin and you probably go, well, how many points did he cost us? How many world championship positions did he cost us? Can we just afford to pay that to Magnussen instead?
Well, and that's it really, because I mean, we had another F1 journalist on the other week, Ben Hunt, was talking about Haas, and we asked him this question about Magnussen, because obviously you've gone from Mazepin to Magnussen, and Mazepin came with the money that he had. That was the only reason why he was in the seat in the first place, and obviously with what happened between Ukraine and Russia, that went away. And then it's almost like, oh, well, Haas, will they be able to continue? They've had so much bad luck responses, etc. And I said, well, they haven't really, because Gene Haas has signed those sponsors. He signed Uralkali. He signed Rich Energy to sponsor the team and put money in. This is a guy that could finance the team himself if he wanted to. Yeah. And now that he's brought in Magnussen, that's just showing, well, maybe he is now putting money in his pocket. Why wasn't he doing this before? Like, you're bringing in higher caliber drivers into your team. Driver that you already had on your books a couple of years ago when he was driving with Roman Grosjean. And it's only going to translate into better results. It almost feels to me there's an onus on some of these team owners, and maybe extend that for future entries into F1 and F2 and F3, etc., that you need to have more people putting money into the sport from that level up, rather than just trying to chase these paid drivers that carry these high sponsors, because it's more lucrative on your books, or when you're not really interested in performing, you just want the exposure that the broadcast will bring you.
And if you have less paid drivers all the way down the grid, the further you go down the tree without needing money, the more likely you are to have, here we go, here's the wokeism alarm, the more likely you are to have women drivers, the more likely you are to have black and minority ethnic drivers as well.
Yeah, so, absolutely agree with you. And that's always been my only pet peeve with the W Series, is that it's great at what it's trying to achieve, but the winner gets what, $500,000 or $250,000 or something like that. Jamie Chadwick's won it like 2 years in a row. And
it wasn't enough, not quite.
It's
a good start.
Yeah,
it's a good start though.
It's a start, but it needs to be significantly more. She's going to be able to fund a single-seater career or attract a bigger sponsor, and that's the next step for it.
I think W Series is great. It's a great idea. I love what they've gone in with. I think it can achieve things. Don't throw out the baby with the bathwater if you don't like exactly what it's achieved. But yeah, I'd love to see a broke series as well. So you had your W Series. Can we have a broke series now? It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what gender you are. It just matters, are you broke? So we could have some kind of brokenness test. So you could have categories for people who had to use the electricity meters in the house, and then press the electricity button, and then run to the post office with a handful of 50p's to see if you could afford another electricity car. What I want, a category for those races. There you go. That's what I want.
I mean, they probably have to start there with just saying, like, there's a checkbox exercise that's saying, are you a millionaire? If you just tick no, you're in.
Yeah. There you go. What brand of shoes, school shoes, did you have? If you birthdays or less.
What is Primark to you?
But I tell you what, before you move on,
yeah,
this is the thing I get the most negative feedback about, is when I talk about ending paid drivers. For whatever reason, people stan the paid driver system. The 'twas ever thus, it will always be this way, it will be eternal. Actually, we need them. So I don't know if these paid drivers also fund like Facebook groups where they convince people that paid drivers are necessary. But I guarantee this is the topic that I get probably the most negative feedback about.
Well, maybe they do. And I'm not quite sure why that is the case. I mean, perhaps we're beyond the realms of getting a bit more political than we want to on this podcast if we started talking about money going into Facebook ads, etc., etc. But anyway, we'll put a pin in that one for now. But I mean, that was fun. But you mentioned your thoughts on Lando Norris, and if I remember right...
No.
Oh, you know when I'm not going to ask you, didn't you?
Go on. I know what you're going to ask. Go on.
Because every so often I listen to BBC Checker Flag, and I remember you going on that show and having a bit of a interesting discussion with Jolyon Palmer. And to be fair with you, Spanners, I actually thought you won that debate on Lando Norris. I agree with you on this. I'm not quite...
No. There's two different things. So the debate was, I said that perhaps we shouldn't quite get so excited about Lando Norris too early, because he'd been a bit flattered by Daniel Ricciardo struggling in a new car. Like all the other drivers who'd gone to new cars last season, all struggled, especially in the first 6 or 7 races. So you're wrong. I didn't win the debate. You could say you agreed with me, but Jolyon Palmer won the debate because Jolyon Palmer is very good at winning debates and talking about F1, has so many more facts to hand, asked me exactly the right questions, like, okay, give me an example of this. And I was like, oh my God, my wife does the exact same thing, and I can never think of an example of this. So he wiped the floor with me debate-wise. I tried to give my points. I did get my points across, so it was all very fair. But clearly, are very passionately behind Lando Norris and very lovely about it before the show and after the show and everything. All that crew, absolutely wonderful. And I was so excited and delighted to be invited on the actual BBC F1 Checkered Flag podcast. I was so excited about it. I could barely talk. I felt like a rabbit in 8 Mile. I was going to lose myself. I have my one opportunity. Am I going to grasp it, or am I going to let it slip away? I got to the point like I could barely breathe before the Zoom call was starting, and I was trying to do test phrases into the mic, and my mouth was gumming up, so I was that nervous. And then we got into it, and I thought, oh, it's okay, the words I'm saying, they sound good, I'm speaking. Immediately got into a debate with Andrew Benson, the chief F1 writer. Immediately got in an argument with Jack Nicholls, but I've done that before, so that's okay. And then that row with Jolyon Palmer, and I just got to the end of the show, I went, oh, blimey. Said I fought with everyone except Jenny there. I hope that was okay.
I've heard Jenny's meant to be really lovely. Like I've never met her or talked to her, but I've heard in terms of F1 journalists, I'm sure they all are, but Jenny especially.
I bet they're all not, but yes.
Well, you're not a fan of Jolyon anymore.
No, not at least. No, maybe he's not a fan of me. No. In the context of the show, that was fine, and it's nice actually to be able to spar and have that kind of orator debate with them. It was an honor, a privilege. But Jenny Gao, absolutely lovely before and after. Very supportive. A good experience. But thanks for bringing up the time that I had my shot at the top of F1 podcasting and got yelled at by the chief of BBC F1 and ex F1 driver and the BBC commentator. Thanks, Adam.
Anytime. But I mean, you can say that, but I will still stand by what I said. I agreed with you on the point that you made, even though Jolyon did bombard you with example after this and that. Fair enough. But I mean, the overall point was, let's not get carried away with Lando. He's a very good driver, and there's a lot of promise.
Yeah, he got on top of Sainz, and I do believe Sainz is just that little step below, like the very, very top drivers. I know it looked good last season against Leclerc, but possibly some mitigating circumstances with Leclerc losing out on points or underperforming or binning it, which, yes, you do need consistency, but it felt always like there was the most potential to unlock with Leclerc over Sainz. So yeah, Norris looked good against Sainz, and at that point in the season, I felt like he was being flattered by a struggling Daniel Ricciardo. And then he had the opportunity to win a race in the changeable conditions. I forget where that was. I think it might have been Turkey.
Russia last year, wasn't it?
Was it Russia?
Yeah, because obviously changeable conditions. And as you were saying, he obviously was asking his team to pit and that wasn't sure. And then he just started shouting on the radio because he'd obviously made the call.
He was shouting to not pit.
That's right. Yeah, because he was shouting to not pit, made that call, and obviously didn't work out for him, and Lewis had made the right call with his team, and the rest was history, really. But that
was just after I'd had that argument with Jolyon Palmer as well. So I was like, maybe.
Did you message him with that?
Oh no, I didn't. Believe it or not, we did not exchange phone numbers. But look, Lando Norris is a talent. I can see why people are getting behind him. It's just that I like to see the data points and the evidence, and I just like to not celebrate it before there's something to celebrate. So in this season now, the excuse that I gave the 6 drivers who changed cars last season, Vettel, Perez, Ricciardo, Tsunoda, whoever else you can think of, which cars. Huh?
It was Vettel and Sainz?
Vettel and Sainz, yeah. Sainz was like the exception, but then Leclerc had bad luck and binned it and stuff like that. So that excuse has kind of gone now. So yeah, let's see how he really does against a highly rated, but perhaps towards the end of his career, Daniel Ricciardo. It might get to the point where Lando Norris doesn't get his big shot and he doesn't get that shot at the title and ends up as a popular top-end midfield high-performing driver. So people were sort of jumping to the conclusion that he was ordained to be the next world champion. And I personally, I just wasn't seeing it. But a wise man changes his mind when the evidence changes. So, always on the lookout. George Russell was another one. Everyone was getting very, very excited about George Russell. Very clearly a talent and doing very well. But people were saying stupid things like, he outperforms that car on a Saturday. Oh, he's missed a Saturday. No, the Williams is just capable of doing that. It's just that you've got an injured driver as his teammate for one season, and then you had Latifi as his teammate for 2 seasons. So we haven't seen how he does against a top driver. So just don't jump to conclusions was all I'm asking. And look, he's jumped into Mercedes. He's nearly on pace with Lewis Hamilton. He's nearly, you would say, up there. It doesn't look as, struggling as much as Bottas against Hamilton. So that's all super positive. But you couldn't have made that conclusion about him 2 years ago when everyone was jumping up and down.
No, absolutely not. And the phrase I always hate that people say is they're outperforming the car. It's like, well, how can you outperform the car? Like you drive the car to its maximum, or the blueprint performance that they like to call it. And again, I like the example of George Russell, because funny enough, I was actually just going to mention that we can't get too carried away with these young stars. Yes, they're extremely talented, but until the evidence is there that they're proving week in, week out that they're doing say, for example, what the likes of Hamilton and Verstappen and what Leclerc at the moment is doing right now, you can't really get too carried away into saying that these guys are going to be the future world champions of Formula One. And again, with George Russell, a guy in his early to mid-20s, as you said, Mr. Saturday, etc., and he's doing okay now.
Yeah, that was rubbish, that Mr. Saturday stuff.
It was a bit, but I mean, there was a few occasions like, wow, that was impressive. But again, if you do it that often, then obviously you must be, driving.
Or it means that car was actually quite good and capable of getting into Q3, Q2. So the other example was me and Matt used to argue loads over the Williams when it was first really struggling in getting out of Q1, and it had Stroll and Sirotkin. And I was saying to him, that's a Q2 car. At least that is a Q2 car. But if you keep just putting paid drivers in it who are off the pace, you just don't know the pace of that car. And then George Russell came in and they were getting out of Q3 and said, oh no, it wasn't that. Now it's other reasons. Now it's aerodynamics or torque springs or something. But these teams really do suffer from getting these paid drivers in. It really does distort what the car can and can't do.
Yeah, no, absolutely agree. Let's move on to F1 2022.
That's this year, right?
Yes, this year.
My watch. Okay. I'm fine,
Still this year. What have you made of it so far? Have you been enjoying it so far? I know, as you said, you've got your affiliation at the moment with Lewis and Mercedes. There was a bit of a moment at the beginning of the season where you sort of temporarily swapped colours with Ferrari, although it might have just been for the banter.
How dare you?
The hype train has plenty of room. We spent 15 years building it, Spanners, so you're more than welcome to jump on.
Last year at Silverstone, I was lucky enough to get into the Ferrari hospitality, to be invited into there. And of course, you get the gift bag with the hat and everything. So I spent the whole day in the enemy camp. And
Render me jealous. Render me jealous then.
Yeah, no, it was really good. And for some reason at Silverstone, the Ferrari hospitality was really, really quiet. And all the other ones were like proper packed out. So, felt even more special. But yes, I do like Ferrari being the bad guys. I love them to be the bad guys, in fact. And I was almost starting to feel like I was a bit nuts for quote unquote hating on a team that really hadn't done anything since 2007, and even then, was 2007? Yeah, 2007.
Yeah, last Drivers' Championship. Yeah.
And even then, that was a bit of a funny one. Like Raikkonen was never in that.
He shouldn't have won it. Yeah, it should have been either Lewis or Fernando. Yeah.
So they've nicked it. It's not fair play. You've nicked that one, and then when was the last one before that? 2004, 2005.
Yeah, 2004. Yeah.
So it was seeming a bit weird. Why are you hating on this team that's either been in the midfield or barely in the top two, apart from 2 seasons? So I almost need them to be really good and win a title to justify me hating on them, if that makes sense. So in a way, yeah, it's good to see them up there competing at the top, and I like both their drivers, which makes it less annoying. Vettel, he was a bad guy in my pantomime of Formula One. Vettel's a baddie, so I didn't enjoy Vettel at Ferrari. Alonso doing well at Ferrari, even though I like Alonso, would still have been insufferable. To have him be the one to bring glory back to the Tifosi would have just somehow, that would have hurt, and I wouldn't want the Vettel with Das Finger as well. So, but Leclerc, yeah, nice driver, nice guy, goes about it the right way, wears his heart on his sleeve, enjoying seeing his success. But in some ways, I still feel like this is an exaggerated version of what we've seen over the past 5-6 years, which is early promise from Ferrari, Red Bull stuttering but developing well, and Mercedes being very good at developing also. Obviously, it's an extreme version of that because they've got to race 3 and 1-2 and come second. But I still feel like they're going to be looking over their shoulder, and it's either Red Bull sorting out their reliability or Mercedes unlocking something and then getting the edge. I still feel this season is absolutely wide open. So from that point of view, that's fantastic. If the Red Bull challenge and the Mercedes challenge drops away and Ferrari just go and take it away, okay, that happens. That'll still be a good season. I think there'll still be good racing down the pack, and then everybody regroup for 2023.
Yeah, and I like the way that some of those drivers that you mentioned. I think as a Ferrari fan, there's not really any drivers, and there's no one that I dislike or anything like that, but there's always drivers that you consider rivals, and you obviously don't want them to do well because of the teams that they drive in, but you think...
Name them, who?
Well, I mean, sort of as a Ferrari fan in the couple of years ago, obviously, as much as I like the Brits to do well, Hamilton was the rival, because he was winning everything at Mercedes, and obviously there was a brief period where Vettel was competing against him. Alonso, it was Alonso versus Vettel, so obviously we didn't want. But my point being is that you don't want to have anything to say or badly or dislike those drivers, because at some point they probably will end up driving in the Ferrari one day. And Lewis is the exception, but I'm pretty sure if Ferrari had a good enough car, it may have happened. So it's one of those that, you can enjoy it for what it is. But in terms of the drivers, who they are, I agree with you that they do come across as the pantomime villain when they're driving at Ferrari, particularly Alonso and Vettel for a time. But then, of course, when they leave that, you sort of humanize them a little bit. You get to know them a bit more, and then you start to fall in love with them a little bit. So some more than others. I think Vettel's probably a prime example of that. He's just a man surrounded in wholesomeness. But then, looking at your face, Richard, I'm not sure you're agreeing with me on that one.
Vettel, pantomime bad guy. I've used this example a fair bit, but he's like in a film franchise where he's the baddie in the first film, and then they want to keep the actor on, but they finish the arc of him being a baddie, so he joins up with the good guys, and then they have to fight an even bigger baddie. So that's what Vettel's done. Like, he's suddenly become the goodie in Formula One. But honestly, I hope the Australian Grand Prix is a blip for Vettel, because nothing looked positive. The driving looked shocking on track. He didn't look like he'd recovered from COVID at all. He didn't look like he'd come off of an extreme winter training package. He just didn't look like a sprightly, ripped up, ready to go, hungry gladiator about to step into a Formula One car. He looked like us. He looked like a mortal. He looked like a dad turning up and just being nice and saying hello to everyone on his scooter. And if that continues, if the performances continue, even now, I think maybe just mid-season, I bet there's a really good job for him lined up at Aston Martin as a team principal or a driver coach or something like that.
Or an FIA race director.
Yeah, or a race director. I just feel like we've come to the end of the Vettel phase naturally and a little earlier than we'd want.
Yeah, I mean, I watched that race and thought to myself, as much as I'm enjoying seeing Seb ride around in a scooter at the end of FP1, part of me feels like if someone had just got into Formula One and seen that for the first time and thought, who is that? I've got to describe to them or tell them that that's a 4-time world champion.
This guy was invincible.
Yeah, early 2010s, the guy was untouchable. And it's so strange to now look at Seb the way he is. And I really hope there are better days ahead for him. But I'm I'm concerned that this could be his last season.
The shot for glory and legacy was 2017, 2018. And that Ferrari... Absolutely. That Ferrari, we did a League of Justice for his Ferrari, where we forgave the Ferrari the driver errors. And I can't remember which way round it was now, but one season he's pushing very, very close to the title, and the other one, that car takes the title. But his personal mistakes really did gift that to Lewis Hamilton. Whether Hamilton had extra gears to pull away after Mexico in those 2 seasons, we don't know, but he didn't need them because Vettel just kept dropping it. And they must have known that at Ferrari. They ended up letting him go. He was meant to be the next in line. Schumacher. Ferrari need a hero, don't they? They need the Schumacher, the Alonso, the Vettel. And so for them to kind of just gently drop him, oh no, don't worry about Charles, he'll be fine. Yeah, he's had a new contract. Don't ask how many years. It's fine. Oh, by the way, you're dropped. Enjoy Aston Martin. That was the chance for Vettel. Anything after that, maybe if Aston Martin had pulled a Brawn or something, but I just don't see a way back now. None of the top teams are going to have him. That team doesn't feel like it's in a position to go and challenge up at the top of the grid, and I don't think it's going to be. So I don't see any other path for Vettel, sadly. Yeah,
no, I agree with you on that one, unfortunately. And it's a shame because as much as I like Seb, but that is how it goes. In 2018, that season in particular, because you mentioned, obviously, Lewis has other gears, and in the second half of the season, as we did last year, we tend to see that with Lewis in the latter stages. And there were times even then where Seb was able to handle it. But then it got to Germany, and that huge mistake that he made, and that was compounded by Lewis winning that race from 17th. And after a few decent results after that, but then it was just Monza and then Suzuka and the US, and he kept clicking.
Look at you, they're all carved into your little Tifosi heart, aren't they?
It hurts so much to reminisce. It really does. And this is why I'm hoping that Ferrari can do something this year, but we'll have to wait and see. And I think it's a good point on Ferrari that development over the course of the season has always been their Achilles heel. They can turn. How many times have they turned up with a good car first race of the season? Quite more often than not in this turbo hybrid era. And it always seems to fall away, particularly when it matters most. notes. So
that's the fear. Yeah. That's the fear for them. 2017. Look at 2012 as well. Weren't they something like 38 points ahead?
Yeah, it was huge.
At the summer break. So that's late into the season with a big advantage. And yeah, it's been a while since Ferrari have like really followed through on something. And people talk about Ferrariing as a verb associated with dropping the ball tactically or messing up a pit stop or developing in the wrong way. And I think they've got to shake that off this season because, that's still got to be hanging over Tifosi heads. Look, I might be injecting 10 cc's of hopium into my Lewis Hamilton fanboy veins here, but I still think there's a question mark over the development race this season. And if you look ahead at the tracks that are coming up, it's all such completely different tracks. Imola, more of a heritage track, and then the farce of Monaco. Well, we've got Miami first, which actually it's a street circuit, isn't it? Around a stadium. It doesn't look as bad as I suspected it was going to be. It does look a little bit like a proper circuit in a way, if that makes sense.
Yeah, good luck doing the live stream on that one after that race because that's an 8:30 start UK time.
Oh, do you know what? We just do it whatever.
I know, yeah.
We've started race reviews at 1 a.m. before. I just tend to select like an American or Australian panel for that. Is how international is your crew?
Pretty much as far as East London.
Yeah.
So not very. It's just down the road.
I like that. Yeah. I like collecting my international crew.
Once DNF1 grows, if we get anywhere near as big as Missed Apex, then we'll probably expand our panel, of course. But yeah, it's just local for now. But no, I totally understand with that. And with Ferrari, of course, I think for me, it's going to happen at some point. There's going to be a moment where something's not going to go right for like really bad, and it's how they react to that. Because throughout the turbo hybrid era, we've seen Mercedes have the odd moment. I mean, Germany 2019, where they were celebrating the I think it was, can't remember what anniversary it was, and they were all dressed up in looked like someone out of Peaky Blinders or something like that. And yet, all that chaos in that one race, where there were the pit stops and the double stacking and Lewis hitting the wall, and it caused all chaos. But then after that, they just carried on as if it never happened. That's what Ferrari need to do, in my opinion. So when it does happen, the big error, whatever it's going to be, they need to react to that. It's going to happen eventually.
Where's your faith, boy?
My faith is there, but I've suffered pain for 15 years, Spanners. It's the only way I know how to cope. Just look forward to the next one and hope that Ferrari don't repeat the mistakes. And in the past, that's what they've been doing. It just compounds one after the other, really.
Anyway, as a fan, it is kind of win-win at the moment. If Mercedes get resurgent and end up taking either of the two titles, it's great. Two great British drivers. Obviously, I'm a local radio host in Cambridgeshire, so if George Russell picks it up, local lad did well. I'd love Lewis to get his 8th title. Leclerc winning a title won't be objectionable to me at all, and I get to start rationally hating Ferrari again because they're the big bad. They're the team to beat again. And now that Perez is the lead driver at Red Bull, who I'm a fan of, I won't mind Red Bull picking up that driver title this season either.
Oh, well, you got your foot in all camps there, so you can't lose, really, unless McLaren do something special and it's Lando Norris, and then...
you watch me get my McLaren hat out quicker than you can sneeze.
Yeah, you say you haven't got Jolyon's number. I bet he might have yours if that happens. But on the subject of Mercedes, because we talked a lot about Ferrari, so we'll put a pin in that one for now. But with Mercedes, a lot of talk has been going around their new car, and obviously pre-season testing where they produced what I heard once was called the Hyde Pod concept, which was quite an interesting one. So far, they're maximising the opportunities they're given to them, and I think they're doing a really, really good job at that. But of course, the obvious
damage limitation.
Exactly, I think that the obvious problem for them is trying to find that. Some people have been saying 8 tenths to a second a lap pace to the lead car. In your mind, Spanner, and obviously you're probably not going to agree with that, but in your mind, how close do you think Mercedes could be to getting themselves into a position where they're competing with Red Bull and Ferrari on a regular basis?
The only reason I was shaking my head there wasn't at the time. It's not that it's a case of, it's 8 tenths to find, okay, now it's 7 tenths, now it's 6 tenths. I don't think it's like that. I think it's more binary. So I think they're going to fix a thing and that will unlock the pace that they have. So they're either going to fix the thing or not fix the thing. The difference this season is probably a little bit of a cost consideration. So one of Mercedes' big advantages was being able to go down the wrong path with more resources. And so they're going to have less of that under the budget cap, but they're still a good engineering team that know how to solve problems, but they can't take the same approach. And the approach that they used to have is, and this is mostly speculation, was one very much more of an engineering team than a racing team. And I know I've worked in design and development in engineering, and there's a difference between starting with your big picture of what you want and working up from that, like maybe Adrian Newey with his pencil and paper, or you have like a committee, a group, a steering board that says, right, we need requirements in this area. So we need this many points of downforce in this area. You and your team go and bring us that. And when you have it, come to us. And it's sending off the different departments to go and work to a set of requirements and then coming together. With less resources, you're able to break that down less. So the talents they have just might need to be, just need more time, and they haven't got the same amount of time to just go and get it wrong. So yeah, do you know what I mean? Does that make sense?
No, absolutely.
Taking the less wrong path.
Yeah, because I think in non-cost cap eras, everyone's been, what the teams like Mercedes, Red Bull, Ferrari, they were able to throw unlimited resources at these cars, and some of these pieces would work and some of them wouldn't, and that was fine because eventually you'd find the silver bullet that people have been talking about. But in this era, that's a lot harder to do, and I feel that whilst I'm confident Mercedes will figure this out, my only concern is, will they figure this out quick enough to keep themselves in a championship challenge? Because they've not only got to do what they want to do with the resources that they have, but they've already got less time and less development time for the first 6 months to do that than Ferrari and Red Bull, which means that there's more chance that those teams could pull away before Mercedes gets to a point where, right, we can catch you guys up and then go from there. What would you say to that?
Two things. Firstly, there's more... Beg your pardon.
Don't worry, listeners. He didn't swear. That's just untimely beep
email.
Yeah,
no, that's my self-bleeping machine. So
it's preempting.
Two things there. Firstly, there's more races. So a slightly bad start is less of a disaster because you've got more time to catch up. Also, we have been used to, in recent battles, having really two dominant cars up at the front fighting, be it Lewis Hamilton and Nico Rosberg, Lewis Hamilton and Sebastian Vettel, Lewis Hamilton, Max Verstappen. So that has meant that every race you're kind of getting, 7-point swing, 7 points here, maybe 9 points if your teammate gets in between. So you look at a 40-point lead and you go, he's going to have to finish first and maybe second, and with his opponent Leclerc third, and it's going to take like 4 or 5 races to catch that up. And if you look at 2016, it was definitely like that. It didn't matter what Rosberg did, he would always finish second. He could have a disaster and he'd cruise through to second place. As soon as Lewis Hamilton had that blow up in Malaysia, that was worth 4 race wins. So suddenly that the 30-point lead that he'd lost there was insurmountable. It was like 4 races left. Rosberg could just cruise home in second place. It's not going to be like that this season because the cars have had to, I believe, with the limited resources and the limited time, they've had to pick a direction and pick a type of car. So you're going to go to one track and it's going to work really well. You're going to then turn up at Monaco and go, actually, we don't have the mechanical grip for these kind of corners and there's no high-speed corners. So this is a bad weekend for us. Let's base all our tactics around finishing 5th and 6th. And that's our target. And so when you're on your off race or when you're on a track that really suits you, the point swing is going to be much more than 7 points. So I believe that, it's 40 points is not the same this season as it was in 2016, as it was in 2017. So is it too late for Mercedes? Not by a long shot. Let's see what they turn up with in Barcelona. So Barcelona is a track with a slow speed section at the end. Shows off your mechanical grip, lots of high speed downforce into turn 8, lots of big stops. Let's see what packages the teams have by Barcelona and then start to make a little bit of a judgment as well. But at the moment, it is about maximizing where you're doing well and minimizing where you're doing poorly. Ferrari are making hay while the sun is shining. They really are cashing in while the other two are struggling. Great, tick in the box. That's putting some points in reserve for some of the leaner years as well. But Mercedes are doing a fantastic job by being reliable, by not worrying about qualifying pace. Like qualifying here at Australia, they couldn't get those tyres to stick. They were doing like 18 warm-up laps.
Yeah.
And because they were solely thinking about the race and not even the start of the race. They were thinking about the middle stints.
And that's so un-Mercedes-like, isn't it? Because you remember throughout their dominance, it got to a point where Lewis could get out of the car and push it faster on his warm-up laps to the point. And now they're having to do practically a full race distance.
And all the teams are having to do that to a certain extent, but they seem to really be quote unquote struggling. But then you go, well, maybe that was the plan. And not just that, you have to look at why is their power unit across all the teams? Why is it down on power? That doesn't. Where's the spicy engine from Brazil? So either there's some secret agreement, Ferrari style, where they've been told to crank it down, or they've just seen something where they go, we'd best run at 80, 90% for a bit for this iteration of engine, whilst we see where it's at. Or you could take the Red Bull approach, which is turn everything up to 11 and only finish half the time, which is what they're doing at the moment. Red Bull are below Mercedes in the Constructors' Championship. Verstappen is below Perez, Russell, and Hamilton, I think, at the moment.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
So there we go. So choose your weapon, and Mercedes seem to have chosen damage limitation and reliability at the moment. Red Bull have gone for it, and it is not working. And Ferrari are ticking every box.
And I like that about Mercedes, because it's quite easy to pick a team that's been so used to success over, and that's an understatement, over the last decade or so. And it can be quite hard for a team to adjust to being in a position where, okay, look, we have to maximize everything that we've got. Let's not go crazy and try to rush this. Let's be methodical. Let's make sure everything's right. Because, of course, everyone was hoping that upgrades would turn up to Australia, and it was hardly anything. Yeah, everyone was,
They went the other way. They added extra sensory equipment and added weight to Hamilton's car. So Hamilton was running a few kilograms overweight so that they could run tests to better understand the car. So they went even the other way to not rush it and not go mad.
Yeah, and the hope was that data that they've collated will obviously bring better upgrades. As you mentioned, Barcelona's often the race where teams tend to bring their next iteration of car, or B-spec cars, if you like. And I think by then, perhaps we'll get a better understanding of it. I mean, look, it's Mercedes. If anyone can do it, it's them. And I have absolutely no doubt that they will. As I said, I think what it comes down to in terms of this championship, and whether they can salvage something from this in terms of a title or not, is how far away the likes of Ferrari and Red Bull will be by the time Mercedes get onto their level, or maybe beyond that. That's the key.
And also look out for when teams start bringing their next engines.
Yes.
Or see if a team blows an engine up. Because I know Alpine are on like their fifth engine. Or
that's crazy, isn't it? Alonso, yeah.
Yeah.
Nuts.
So then we might see like little sneaky iterations start to sneak in. So if like a Monaco or Barcelona, Russell blows their engine, and then you see an early engine come in, that might be one to look out for as well. Okay. Yeah, there we go.
And then whenever Verstappen decides to push, his engine seems to go, or something with the fuel, whatever you want. I mean, that's just crazy in its own right. But obviously, we love an unpopular opinion, and I think we've probably had a few on here already from both of us.
I'll give you one. I'll give you another one.
I was going to ask you a few, but one in particular.
Okay, so false dawn for Haas. They will be strong again in Bahrain, but then... No, not Bahrain, beg your pardon. They will be strong again in...
Imola?
There's one more race. Yeah, maybe Imola. Is it Imola that seems to correlate to Bahrain?
I think Imola's the one, yeah.
No, I don't think it might. Okay. So I remember somebody saying that one of the upcoming tracks correlates to Bahrain well. But apart from that, they're going to take a dive and be regularly out of the points. Sorry, Haas.
Yeah, do you know what? I wouldn't want that to happen, but I can very much see that happening, because I think Australia is quite a unique circuit, Albert Park.
Yeah, you can't say
there are certain hallmarks about it that you can correlate to other circuits where it might cause Haas to struggle. So yeah, I can definitely see that. McLaren as well. Yeah, I was impressed by them, but I want to see them at more circuits before I start thinking, they might actually have found their problems, because I think it seemed to surprise both Lando and Ricciardo at how good the car turned out to be at Albert Park. So I'm not sure if I should take that as, maybe McLaren are back. Probably not. Not yet.
Too early.
Yeah, way too early. Okay, so I think all that's left to say, Spanners, is thanks so much for coming on. Really, really enjoyed that discussion with you. I mean, look, I could talk to you for ages. It's been a lot of fun. But I know obviously you've got a lot to get on with as well.
I've got to sell a house. Do you want to buy a house? All right. It's got a shed. It's got a shed with a studio in it.
So funny enough, I was actually thinking at one point, eventually when I get my own place, that is something I want to have, a lot of podcasting shed. Just I
can recommend it highly. It's fully insulated, fully soundproof. The kids can be yards outside kicking the ball around, and I won't hear them. It's absolute bliss, and it has been a real pleasure to come and talk to you as well. And I love that you can have me on and instantly get into a debate. I think that is one of the wonderful things about the sport, is that you can just disagree passionately and know where the line is to stop that.
I had that one prepared. Obviously, following your show for some time now, I had that one prepared. I thought, no, that is definitely the icebreaker.
Sneak attack, eh?
50-50. You were either going to log off the call or stay on and carry on and have the episode that we were having. I thought I'll give it a try, see what happens. But for the benefit of our listeners that don't know Missed Apex or don't know you, Spanners, where can they find you and where can they find Missed Apex?
missedapex.net. You can go and check out everything there. Not that I want to steer anyone away from DNF1 and the good work that you guys are doing, confined entirely to East London. But go check us out at missedapex.net. We do like a scrap. We've probably got one too many Lewis Hamilton fans on there as well. So I'll warn you, it's probably not your safe Tifosi haven that you've got over here. But if you'd come and say hello, we'd appreciate it.
Oh, you'd be surprised. I'm the minority in that regard because I've got my 2 regular guests on the show. They're Mercedes Hamilton fans as well. So that our followers that like that will probably fit right in listening to Missed Apex.
Yeah. In that case, come over for Hamfosi Heather at missedapex.net. Cheers. Thank you for having me on.
No problem. Thanks very much. Really appreciate it. But guys, of course, as always, if you have enjoyed this episode, please do consider liking the video. And of course, if you're following us on your favorite podcasting platform, do consider liking and following that as well. Of course, if you think we're worthy of a 5-star review on Apple or iTunes, whichever one that you call it, please do consider doing that. As a reward, we will give you a shout out on the next episode as well. But until next time, guys, please stay safe. Thank you so much for tuning in. Check out Missed Apex Podcast. You will not regret it. And we'll see you in the next episode of the DNF1 F1 Podcast. Take care.